Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be venturing into the creepy and twisted minds of stalkers. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get uncomfortable, check who's behind you, and let the darkness take control. This happened years ago, but still affects me to this day. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late one night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. It was unbelievably hot, and I had the window open as I sat and folded clothes. It was around 2 a.m., and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed, and the hand flew back out. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was just my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window and just saw the figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room, and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mum had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out her mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw a man dressed in black who slinked into our backyard along the tree line, as unfortunately there wasn't a fence on that side. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds and ran to another tree and hid there, slowly working his way towards my window. My mother yelled something to him, and he took off running. The police returned but couldn't find a trace of him. I never opened that window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited, as this was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken, but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance near the lights, but often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park further away on darker streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, which I always threw on the ground. But once, a pair of men's underwear was left, and even more creepily, there was an occasion where a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy, were left as well. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was a laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started to fold, I realized all of my undergarments, bras and panties were gone. Another week, I had a male friend over from school, and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved he had been watching me closely. I was able to arrange for another friend to take over my lease, and I moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secured building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were wary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, they met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that the new boyfriend, Matt, was extremely good looking. And while Ashley was a wonderful person, she wasn't the type you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She'd never had a boyfriend and really felt like he was her Prince Charming. I, however, thought he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting an uncomfortable, leering smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of a conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted my MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. They were only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down, and Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day I came home from work and found Matt on my couch alone drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work and she told him he could stay to just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so later, he knocked on my door and suggested we watch some TV and get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that perhaps I ought to give it a try. He put on a movie, and I tried to just focus on that because I didn't want to talk. At one point, I glanced over to Matt, and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. "What?" I snapped at him, and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked him. He said nothing and went back to watching the movie, still smiling. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing on my body. I excused myself, went to my room, and locked the door. Another month or so went by, and I had managed to avoid being home for as much as possible, anything beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there and had even brought a bunch of his things into Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but was beginning to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge bouquet of flowers on the table and an already opened card propped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what the weirdo had wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. Without even reading the words he wrote, I was shaking. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one my stalker had sent. I had kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on their way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work, but said that she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her, and they ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt and left a furious message, even though the cops told her not to say anything, and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place he said he had worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said he had been staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state, and she had never met a friend of his because he said they had a falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on top of this whole thing was when we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when he disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes, but in one of the compartments there were about 10 pictures of me, all taken from far away, with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I knew it had been at my current apartment before I started locking my bedroom door. A few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us link that it was him as well. 2 pairs of my missing underwear were there, and I shudder to think of what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with red lipstick, a necklace I hadn't even noticed missing, and a few other random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I had been considering and got the hell out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger, maybe misplaced, for believing all of his lies and letting him get into our lives. I don't know what his endgame was. Would he have tried to hurt me, or was he simply content with being in my world? I will never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor woman. But every time I visit my hometown, I tense up and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again. For context, I am a shy 19-year-old girl who doesn't tend to go outside very often, other than when I walk my 2 dogs, walk to college, or go to the store. I walk my dogs in a small, almost triangle-shaped area with a small, slightly overgrown pathway, which was only used by myself and a couple of other dog owners on my street. The left side of the triangle is formed from a line with trees, with an old metal fence behind it. One part of the fence was broken and had a large gap in it, which led into a much larger field that was used for football practice and friendly games. The right wall of the triangle was created from wild bushes and shrubs, many of which were jagged and extremely overgrown. The bottom of the triangle is formed of an overgrown thick hedge. The pathway is in the center of this hedge. One night around the start of October, I was walking my dogs in the area, and something felt wrong. I felt like I was being watched. I ignored this feeling and told myself I was just being paranoid. My dogs were doing their thing when I heard leaves crunching from behind the trees. My dogs immediately turned to face the trees and began growling. I had never seen them react this way before, and the crunching sounded too slow for it to be a squirrel. I couldn't see anything since it was late, and there's no light in the area, but I bailed and pulled my dogs back and quickly headed home, still feeling like I was being watched, until I made it to my house and locked the door. The following few weeks were similar. Every night when I would walk the dogs in the area, I felt like I was being watched, despite not being able to see anyone there. On a couple of occasions, my small dog would stop what she was doing and stare at the trees and growl. My big dog would also refuse to enter the area on these nights. I put the feeling of being watched down to paranoia and guessed my dogs were just being weird. The week before Halloween, I was walking my dogs, but instead of feeling like I was being watched, I felt something different. I felt fear. I ignored the feeling and walked up the pathway. Both my dogs refused to follow until I had reached the end of the path. Then they both ran to me and started barking as they faced the area where the hole in the fence was. Like I said, the area is dark and overgrown, so it is hard to see. However, I swear that I saw the outline of someone crouching half hidden behind the tree that was next to the hole in the fence. I didn't stick around long enough to investigate. I pulled the dogs back and left as fast as I could. I looked behind me as I was leaving and saw that the hedge was moving. Nope. I ran, and my dogs did their best to keep up with me until we got back inside. I decided that from then on, I would just walk my dogs elsewhere, which I did, and the feelings of being watched at night and my dog's weird behavior subsided. Then Halloween arrived. I had decided to do some Halloween baking and made a batch of cupcakes. I went to decorate them and discovered I was out of icing bags, so I walked to the store. This is only a 15-minute walk on foot, so it didn't take long to get there. I buy the icing bags and a few other things, then begin to walk home. My street is like a side street that leads off on a long straight road, so I have to walk down this road to get to my street. As I was walking down the long road, a guy in a black car that was already parked on the road stopped me. "I'm looking for a friend who lives in area, but I don't know where he is," he said in a slightly broken English. The guy begins to describe a guy who matches his own description. "Nope, sorry, I don't know anyone around here who matches that description," I said. The guy then asked me if I was Irish because of my accent, which I tell him I'm not. He asks me how long I've been living in the area, and I reply with, "my whole life." He then begins to ask me more things about myself. I find this extremely weird, since he had now stopped asking for directions. "Do you know what house number your friend stays at or anything?" I asked. The guy stops and stares at me for a moment, then says, "Look, I'll be honest. I don't have friends who live in area. I saw you in store and thought you looked interesting. I've seen you before, actually." I laughed awkwardly and mentally prepared myself to start running at any moment if anything happened, but I knew I couldn't outrun a car. "You just look so interesting. I wanted to know more about you. I had to find a way to approach you. You're just so... You know, I fancy you so much. I had to talk to you. I have been seeing you walking your dogs too. You ran before I could talk to you then." I'm horrified at this point, and just stand there like an idiot mentally freaking out. "How old are you?" he asks. Without hesitation, I lied and said 16, in the hopes it would scare him off. He hints his steering wheel with his fists and says, "Too damn young. Are you sure you're 16? I nod and walk away, trying to keep my cool, making sure I wait for the sound of a car leaving before I reach for my phone, which was in my back jean pocket. I immediately text my recently ex-boyfriend freaking out over what happened and tell him everything. He keeps messaging me and makes sure I got home safely. Not only had this guy been watching me walk my dogs and pretty much confirmed that he was the guy behind the tree, but this guy has been watching me long enough to know the route I take home, despite not leaving my house very often or venturing far from my house when I do go out. I hope that the fact I lied about my age will keep him away and ensure that we never meet again. I lived for a short while in an ex-Yugoslav country in the Baltics. There I met a bunch of totally weird men that I still can't comprehend. Some of it was culture shock, but most, I still maintain, was borderline illegal. I was volunteering in a youth center and lived less than a 2-minute walk away on the main road and across a small car park. I was 19 at the time. This story begins 40 kilometers away in another town, where myself and quite a few other volunteers from around the country were invited to a party early in my placement. We were given cheap, local bootleg spirits as a welcome, which was particularly potent. I blacked out during the night but was totally safe, and I came to at a friend's apartment, where a couple of people had also crashed. It was about 6 a.m, and my train had been at 4 a.m, so obviously I panicked. Taking stock, I discovered I had no shoes, and my friend who had come with me had left without me, and taken my purse, phone, and train ticket. I was totally stranded. One of the people who was there was an older guy. He offered to find me some shoes. Feeling a little worse for wear, I let him help me. He wasn't a total random. He worked with the local volunteer who was my friend. He took me to his home, and I noticed toys laying around his front room. He told me that he lived with his parents, so I asked him if they belonged to a sibling. Nope, they were his daughters. None of the shoes fitted me, so we went to a friend of his. She gave me some seriously beaten up Converses, and I offered to pay for them, but she said that she had literally just pulled them out the trash. The guy then took me home. I offered to pay him as he mentioned he was a taxi driver, and it was 40 kilometers. He just told me that I didn't have enough money, and this is where it got weird. He got my phone number off another volunteer who thought she was setting us up. He rang me that night and the next, inviting me for cocktails. I declined politely. The third night, I walked home late from work, totally exhausted, and saw that his car was parked in the car park. I said hi, and he invited me for cocktails again, and said he hadn't known when I was getting home, so he'd driven there and waited for me to get back. He'd waited 3 hours. I again declined, now totally spooked, and rushed inside where my apartment building had security doors. The next night he was there again outside my house. It was raining, so he didn't get out of his car, but he rolled down the window and waved me over, telling me how beautiful I was, and how it was lovely spending time the night before. I went inside again. My phone wouldn't stop ringing that night, with his number each time. The next day I went into my boss's office and found him there chatting to her. He'd come on some official business between the two youth centers, though even my boss, not having a clue on the connection between us, said it was strange that he'd come by, because they normally posted these sort of documents to each other. When she realized the town he was from was the one I'd been to over the weekend, she asked if we'd met. He just looked at me and said, "I thought I recognized you." He phoned that night one last time and asked him why I wasn't talking to him. I pointed out that he'd turned up on my doorstep and at my work unannounced. I didn't know him that well, and he blamed it on me being an uptight English girl. And thankfully, I never heard from him again. I was in 4th grade in the late 80s, although, as kids, we felt mostly invincible. There was this kind of mild horror that surrounds everything. It was the tail end of satanic panic. Getting an apple in your trick-or-treat bag meant razor blade. Every single white van that drove by was trying to take you. My brother and I spent one Sunday sitting on the front porch, crouched behind the wrought iron railing, bored and looking for anything to do. We'd exhausted the library book my mum let us borrow about secret codes. We somehow got it in our head to start writing down license plates and making models of cars. It was mostly curiosity, but we kept seeing this one number over and over again. Of course, it was a white van. We told our parents, and they kind of exchanged glances. My dad asked us to describe the driver, and he said he knew the guy. Our town was small, so it made sense. Thinking back, I'm betting he just didn't want us to worry. Also, who writes down license plate numbers? We were weirdos. The morning after, I heard my dog barking in the way he did when he was angry and defensive. He only did this when there was a threat nearby, and all the adults were acting off. It was whispered, but my uncle told my dad, "I'm staying home from work. Someone is watching the house." The flyer that they passed around my class that day had a police sketch type drawing of a guy who was a suspicious person hanging around the school. The flyer said, "To be aware and don't let your children walk home alone." The drawing looked like any other regular guy. Our parents made us memorize code words in case someone non-family needed to pick us up. I usually walked home, but my mum stopped letting me. At school we had this thing at recess. The doors at the school were super heavy and locked from the inside as soon as they closed. So our teacher would have one of us hold the door for the 20-minute period while everyone else was running around. It was somewhat of a status symbol among 9-year-olds. Whoever was holding the door was very important. During recess, kids would come up and chat with you, and it was understood that you were like the assistant teacher in a sense. My friends kept coming up and telling me that a guy was throwing rocks from the woods. They were excited and terrified, and it didn't take long for teachers to notice and quickly usher the class back inside. The next day, we went up behind the baseball diamond. It was creepy near the woods, but you could see the houses beyond the line of trees, so I figured we were okay. I remember my best friend shouting, and there were dozens of Polaroids scattered on the ground near the pitcher's mound. They were all of kids, some repeats, some different. The only common thing was that all of the faces were scribbled out violently with a black Sharpie. I didn't want to touch them. It made me feel sick and dizzy. We went home and told our parents. They mostly rolled their eyes at us and said we were being dramatic. My mum seemed concerned, but I don't think anything ever came of it. and when I ask her now, she apparently doesn't remember. A while back, when I was 14 or so, a group of friends and I went out downtown to do a bit of cosplay photo shoot. We were all dressed pretty crazy, so it wasn't a huge surprise that it drew in a bit of attention. Not a big deal really. We were cool with answering questions about what we were doing and all. We went to a market in the center of downtown for lunch, and once we finished, half of us went to the washroom and the others waited outside the market and began discussing the best place to take photos. A man approaches us, wanting to know if there was an event going on and why we were dressed that way. A second older man also approached us, standing next to the first guy, and just listens to our conversation. As our conversation dies down, the older man begins to act kind of weird, fidgety, and twitching awkwardly, and looking around quickly. Then he smiles at me very creepily and asks if he could kiss me. My immediate reaction as a 14-year-old boy with major anxiety is to quietly say, "No thank you," and hope that was the end of it. It wasn't. The older man takes a step towards me again and asks, adding a please. My friend asks the other younger man if he knew the guy, and if they could please leave us alone. The guy apologizes and says he doesn't know the dude, but tries to tell him he should leave us alone. The older man is having none of it, ignoring everyone and taking another step towards me, now demanding that I let him kiss me. I said no again, taking a step back, and suddenly the guy nearly lunges at me. I bolted back into the market, trying to hide in the large crowd, making my way upstairs and collapsing in a corner to cry, because that whole experience at 14 is absolutely horrifying. My friends eventually found me, calmed me down, and we decided that the market wasn't a safe place to be in at the moment. So we left, walking to a mall about 7 to 8 blocks away. We walk around for a bit, and I'm finally enjoying myself and calmed down, until I turn the corner to see the same old creep from earlier walking 10 feet behind us. As soon as he notices that I saw him, he gives the same creepy smile as before and begins his approach towards us. We scatter, running off, finally losing him and deciding it would be best to go home and do this photo shoot another day somewhere safer. This occurred when I was about 7 to 8 years old, and is a story that I only just recently remembered. It was summertime, and my mom was having a garage sale in our driveway. Her, me, my brother, who was aged 4 or 5 at the time, and my grandmother, my mother's mum, were all seated inside of the garage during the sale. Me and my brother, of course, had been playing a bit though, running from our yard and then back to our driveway and such. We had a few visitors, but it was one woman who was responsible for this story. She was older, about 70-something, and walked with a limp. I remember this because she had a cane. She was on foot and was carrying nothing but a small red toolbox, not a lunchbox, a literal metal toolbox. She carried things inside of that you could hear clanging around. My dad had one just like it when I was a kid, that I wasn't allowed to touch because he was a plumber and didn't want me or my brother near his expensive tool set. So I found it strange that she was just walking around with it. She didn't greet us. She just started picking things up and looking at them. My mum decided to initiate conversation, and this is how it went. "Hi, good morning. Do you have anything for free?" "Excuse me?" "Items I can pick up. Like this. Is this for free?" No, sorry, everything has a sticker on it with a price. Why is it not free? It's a garage sale. I'm trying to sell things. It was at this point the lady went quiet, and my mum just stood up staring at her. My grandma called me and my brother to sit behind her, and we watched and waited for something else to happen. The woman set her toolbox on one of our tables and opened it up to reveal a bunch of random things. Little trinkets, loose change, actual tools. She had everything from Kleenex to quarters. It was weird. She motioned towards a small group of figurines my mum was selling and asked if she could have one for free. At this point, my mum was getting annoyed and wanted this lady to leave. She said so, and the woman started walking towards us. She said something about how cute me and my brother were as we sat ducking behind my grandmother's chair. She started walking into our garage, and my mum told her to stop and repeated that she should leave. She said something else about me and my brother and asked if we liked her trinkets while she stood staring at us. And my grandma chimed in that she would call the police if the woman didn't leave. She then slowly turned around, walking back to her toolbox, lifting up one of the figurines and very obviously putting it in the box without paying for it. My mum didn't fight her, just told her to leave now. So she did. She wandered up and down our street away from our driveway, but within eyesight. We kept an eye on her for the rest of the day as she roamed around our neighborhood and surrounding streets until she finally left. It was super weird, and us kids were advised not to leave our garage sale for the rest of the day. The story continues. About a week later, when me and my brother were playing outside again. We have landscaping around our house, which are rocks that have flower planters and birdhouses, nothing too spectacular, and it wasn't unusual for me and my brother to climb and stand on these rocks as kids. We started walking around my house to do this, and then went inside to get a drink or something of a sort. We weren't gone for more than a few minutes when we came back outside and returned to the exact spot that we had just been in, and immediately noticed that woman with the same bright red toolbox sitting on top of one of the rocks in our landscape. I ran back inside with my brother to inform our parents. My dad went outside to retrieve the toolbox, and it was the same that the woman had had, with her items still stored inside. I hadn't seen her since the garage sale, still never have, but somehow she managed to leave that toolbox there without being noticed, which meant she had to have been watching and waiting for the ideal moment. The creepiest part is that our yard is away from our garage. In order to get to that part of our landscaping, you would have to go up our driveway and literally walk across the entire length of our lawn and front of our house, and then to the side in order to place it there, since we have thick hedges blocking the rest of our yard from the public. We have 2 big windows on the front and side of our house that were open, which just creeps me out more when I think she could have been watching us from the outside. I don't remember what my parents did with said toolbox. I'm pretty sure they threw it away. None of us have seen that woman again. Also, there's no chance that we missed the toolbox the first time round. It was bright red and literally within our walking path, and I noticed it was there as soon as I turned the corner of our yard. There was no missing it. I don't know what her intentions were, but I'm glad we haven't encountered her since. Toolbox lady, let's not meet again. It was around 12 a.m, and I was sitting by myself at a cosplay rave in the chairs instead of dancing while my friends were in the crowd. This is because I tire very easily, and do enjoy listening to the music and watching people have fun. A guy dressed as a certain Jedi came up to me. I'd met him earlier. He found me sitting off to the side of a hallway in a corner recharging, and tried to strike up a conversation. I'd faced away the entire time, and gave him one-word replies because I was clearly tired and uninterested. I have autism and get worn down quickly, especially in crowds, and I informed the guy that I was tired. A guy friend running a DJ booth nearby came over when he noticed the unwanted company, hugged and kissed me on the cheek while shooing away the Jedi look-alike. He told me later he wanted to send the guy "she's taken" vibes to ward him off. However, the Jedi guy was unfazed. He did eventually wander away to an event, much to my relief. But here he was again, somehow able to recognize me under my new character's extreme face makeup, although I hardly recognized him. I wouldn't have, as I'm nearly face blind, if it wasn't for the costume. It was pretty dark in the rave too. He asked me if I wanted to dance and I said no, but he insisted. I continued saying no. Then he asked me if I wanted to go up to his hotel room with him. Again, no. He didn't like my answer, so he grabbed my wrist and yanked me out of my chair and started dragging me towards the exit. As I pulled back hard in clear resistance like a game of tug-of-war with my arm as the rope, but it wasn't working. So I balled my free hand into a fist and started mentally counting down from 5, because I was just about to happily sucker punch him in his face. The 5-second countdown buffer was to give him a chance to stop being stupid, though I really should have just given it to him straight away. I'm small but have taken martial arts, and have no problem crossing justified sucker punch off my list. As soon as I hit 1, my friends showed up for their routine checkup on the introvert, and they all have looks of horror drawn on their faces. He lets go immediately and took off into the crowd. I knew I should have started my countdown earlier, and thankfully that was the last I saw of that creeper. I made a public post about looking for a space to rent in the city where I work. Rather than replying to the post, a throwaway account with no picture and an obviously fake name messaged me directly saying, "Call this number." For some reason, the short message in combination with the account already felt off. About 10 hours after I received the message, I called. He answered first ring with an oddly cheerful voice and gave a totally different name that was listed in the account and offered no explanation. While he seemed particularly keen to have me come and check out the space, he said that it could not be on a weekday, when I could easily pop by after work, but specifically had to be a weekend. When I started explaining I lived rather far away currently and asked if it was possible to meet during the week, he insisted it wasn't, and added that I couldn't pass up a spot that was only a mile away from where I work. I never told him where I worked. It's certainly possible that he Googled me, but from start to finish, everything felt very wrong indeed. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Wow, where has the year gone? I still can't believe it's December. I still can't believe it's going to be 2020. I look back at my life and it's gone by so fast. Even this year, although I do believe genuinely, I say that every year. And probably everyone does, but how is it December? Goodness, time goes by so fast. In any case, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it didn't seem too fast for you. A solid 40-minute vid, nice and fun. I do apologize for the compilation, as well as the lack of publishing the day before. It's been quite challenging here. Lots of stuff has been popping up, lots of people in the house during my recording time that I can't avoid, and, well, it's very hard to record at other times. In any case, I think it'd be fun to do a live stream soon. Maybe I'll do one of those. I'm going to try and produce a video every day for the rest of the month, hopefully. So yeah, that's a little challenge I'm setting myself. A video every day. I'm also trying, not sure if you guys have noticed, this obviously being an exception, to make my videos slightly longer. They're usually around the 40-minute mark, trying to up it to around 50 minutes, maybe an hour sometimes. I'll see how it goes, but just generally pushing for slightly longer videos now, because I know you guys like them, and I want to give you content that you guys keep enjoying. As always, a huge thank you to the names that have been on screen and that are on screen now. These are my incredible patrons who help me out a bunch by pledging a small amount of money every month to keep the channel running. If you guys are interested in helping me out and also receiving a bunch of perks for doing so, feel free to check out the link in the description. It certainly does mean a lot to me if you would check it out, and it helps a bunch. In any case, for now guys, it's time for me to sign off. But not before telling you that you can send in your stories with the links in the description to my email or my Reddit page. But anyway, for now, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.